Well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here today. I am, as was said, now President and CEO of the Newseum at 555 Pennsylvania Avenue. Of course, the Newseum is dedicated to the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment, both in the United States and to promoting freedom overseas. I hope you all visit and visit often. And topic today, challenges and opportunities to democracy in Africa, is therefore not only of great personal but of continuing professional interest to me. We approach the question of democracy, of freedom in Africa, of course, at a particular moment. A majority of countries have now celebrated their 50th anniversary of independence, and therefore, by standards of today's world, are increasingly mature, although quite young by the standards of many other countries. The bottom line for democracy in Africa, I think, has been it's proven to be very difficult, but this is as to be expected. When I speak of democracy, I have a somewhat different definition than what Steve was talking about. His definition of electoral democracy relied largely on the question of whether there are free and fair elections. That's very important. But of course, the critical aspect of democracy is whether there is the expectation that if the ruling party loses in a free and fair election, it will leave. And that, of course, is what a great deal of it hangs on. If there is the expectation that the opposition can win an election and gain power, that sets up a dynamic, a very beneficial dynamic, which we all understand. Of course, elections aren't the end of the game, as I'll talk about. There are many other aspects of democracy as we understand it, but the expectation that if an electorate votes a party out, it will leave is absolutely critical. Historically, democracy has been very hard to create. In our own country, extending the franchise was a project of almost 2 centuries until everyone essentially in the adult population had the franchise in the 1960s. Other aspects of democracy have proven very hard for Western countries to achieve. For instance, in France, the question of civilian control of the military was not decisively decided until the late 1950s. The history of democratization in many countries, not our own, but in many countries, has been attempts at political liberalization, failure, and then further attempts based on learning. The United States, with a continual constitutional regime, has been somewhat different, but the history of democracy and throughout much of the world is not of a linear progression towards greater freedom, but rather halting progress and real periods of backsliding.